The morning sun of Centros Prime cast strange purple light through the tall windows of the Galactic Military Academy. Students from across the galaxy filled the classroom, their different forms creating a bizarre mix of shapes and colors. Some looked like giant bugs, others like living crystals, and a few seemed to be made of pure light. Zixara adjusted her forearms and clicked her mandibles nervously. The young Vectar had always been good at studying military history, but today felt different. Professor Kethmal had promised them something special for their final project. Students, the professor's voice echoed from his many tentacles as he entered the room. His ancient form moved slowly between the desks. Today we begin your most important assignment. You will study the combat methods of newly contacted species. Chrysatel, a tall crystalline being, hummed softly. Her crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the wall. Professor, we have studied many species already. The Gorthak raids, the Pelnari defensive wars, the Zune expansion conflicts. They all follow the same patterns. Floen bobbed in her water suit, her fins moving gracefully. The aquatic Merloth always spoke in bubbles, but the translator made her voice clear. Most species fight for resources or territory. The conflicts are usually short and focused. Bright pulse flickered between yellow and blue, the energy being's way of showing interest. Combat between civilized species follows rules. There are limits. Casualties stay low. Wars end quickly when one side gains advantage. Professor Kethmal's tentacles curled in what the students had learned was amusement. Yes, that has been true for the species we have studied so far. But today we examine a different kind of being. Today we study humans. The word humans meant nothing to most of the students. They had heard rumors of a new species joining the galactic community, some primitive mammals from a backwater planet. Nothing interesting about them. Let me give you their basic information. Professor Kethmal continued, activating the holographic display. Species name: Homo sapiens. Homeworld: Earth, third planet from a yellow star. Bipedal mammals, average. Height 1.7 meters, limited natural weapons, no armor plating, no poison, no ability to fly. Zixara looked confused. Professor, they sound very weak. Why are we studying their military history? Do they even have wars? The professor's tentacles twitched again. Oh, they have wars. Download your research files and begin reading. I will return in 2 hours to discuss your findings. The students activated their study terminals and began accessing the human military database. At first, they found what they expected. Early human conflicts over food and shelter, basic territorial disputes, simple weapons made from stone and wood. See? Christel said, her crystal form pulsing with satisfaction. Just like every other primitive species, they fight with crude tools over basic resources. But as they read deeper, confusion began to set in. The humans seemed to fight a lot. Not just occasionally like most species, but constantly. There were wars listed for every time period in their recorded history. Floen was the first to notice something strange. Wait, look at this. They have something called the 100 Years' War. They fought their own species for 100 Earth years, over what they call succession rights. That cannot be correct. Bright pulse flickered red with disbelief. No species fights for a century over leadership. The resources needed would bankrupt both sides. Zixara pulled up another file. Here is something called World War II. It says 70 million humans died in this conflict. That number must be wrong. The students stared at the numbers on their screens. 70 million casualties was more than the total population of most galactic civilizations. It was definitely more than all the war deaths in recorded galactic history combined. The translation system must have errors, Christel decided. Perhaps it means 70,000 or 700. No species would kill 70 million of their own kind in a single war. But the more they read, the more disturbing the information became. The humans had not just 1 or 2 major wars. They had dozens. They fought on every part of their planet, in every season, in every type of weather. They invented new weapons, constantly, each one more deadly than the last. Floen discovered human naval combat and her fins trembled. They built ships specifically to fight other ships, not to transport goods or explore, but to destroy other vessels. They loaded them with explosive projectiles and metal ammunition. "Look at this," Zixara said, her voice high with stress. They created something called Greek fire. It is a substance that burns on water. Who thinks to make fire that burns on water? The students were beginning to realize that human warfare was different from anything in the galactic databases. Most species fought defensively, trying to protect their territory or resources. Humans seemed to fight offensively, actively seeking out conflict. Bright Pulse found records of human siege warfare. They would surround enemy cities and wait for the inhabitants to starve, sometimes for years. And when that was too slow, they built machines designed specifically to break down defensive walls. "This cannot be normal behavior," Christel insisted, but her crystal form was dimming with uncertainty. "No rational species develops this many ways to kill their own kind." The files revealed that humans had fought wars in every possible environment. Underground in tunnel systems, high in mountains, across vast deserts, in frozen wastelands, and on the open ocean. They developed different weapons and tactics for each environment. Zixara made another disturbing discovery. They have something called asymmetric warfare. When facing superior enemies, instead of surrendering like any logical species, they adapt. They use improvised weapons, hidden attacks, and psychological tactics to damage enemy morale. "Psychological tactics?" Floen asked. "They attack the mind?" According to this, they would spread fear and confusion among enemy forces. They would make their enemies afraid to fight by being unpredictable and violent. The students continued, reading in growing silence. Every file revealed new levels of human creativity in combat. They weaponized farming tools, turned peaceful chemicals into poison gas, and developed explosive devices of incredible power. Bright Pulse discovered human air warfare. They learned to fly in machines and immediately turned those machines into weapons platforms. Within years of first flight, they were dropping explosive devices from the sky onto ground targets. "Here is something truly bizarre," Christel announced. "During their World War I, they dug trenches across entire continents and shot at each other for 4 years. 4 Earth years, over control of a few kilometers of mud. When Professor Kethmal returned, he found his students sitting in stunned silence around their terminals. The usual chatter and discussion was completely absent. "Well," he said cheerfully, "how are your studies progressing?" Zixara spoke first, her voice small and confused. "Professor, are these files accurate? Did the humans really fight this many wars?" "The files are accurate," Professor Kethmal confirmed. "Every piece of information has been verified multiple times." "But why?" Floen asked. "Why do they fight so much? Most species have maybe 1 or 2 wars in their entire recorded history. Humans seem to have 1 or 2 wars every generation." Professor Kethmal's tentacles curled thoughtfully. "That is an excellent question. What do you think the answer might be?" The students looked at each other uncertainly. Nothing in their previous studies had prepared them for this kind of constant, creative violence. "Perhaps," Bright Pulse suggested, "their planet is very dangerous? Maybe they had to fight constantly, just to survive? Or maybe they lack the intelligence for peaceful solutions," Christel offered. Professor Kethmal's expression became more serious. "Those are reasonable theories, but let me give you some additional information. Humans are not stupid. Their technological advancement is actually quite rapid, and their planet, while challenging, is not more dangerous than many others." "Then why?" Zixara demanded. "Continue your research," Professor Kethmal said simply. "The answer will become clear as you read more. But I should warn you, what you have seen so far is just the beginning. Human military history becomes much more interesting as you move closer to their present day." With that ominous statement, the professor left them to their studies. The students looked at their terminals with new dread. If what they had already learned was just the beginning, what horrors awaited them in the more recent human files? The next day brought no relief for the alien students. If anything, their research into human warfare had become more disturbing overnight. They gathered in the classroom earlier than usual, each carrying the weight of what they had discovered. in their individual study time. Zixara clicked her mandibles anxiously as she activated her terminal. I could not sleep last night. I kept thinking about those casualty numbers. How does any species survive losing so many of their own? Maybe they breed very quickly, Flowen suggested, though her fins drooped with doubt. Like some primitive species that produce many offspring to account for high death rates? Christel hummed a low, worried note. I researched their biology. Humans have long gestation periods and usually produce only one offspring at a time. Their population recovery should be slow, not fast. Bright pulse flickered between colors rapidly, showing stress. Then how do they maintain their numbers while fighting constantly? The mathematics do not work. The students dove back into the human military files, this time focusing on how humans managed to sustain such devastating conflicts. What they found made their understanding of the species even more confusing. Look at this, Zixara said, pulling up industrial production data from human World War II. During this conflict, they converted their entire civilization to war production. Factories that made civilian goods were changed to produce weapons, vehicles, and ammunition. Flowen studied the numbers with growing amazement. In less than 4 Earth years, they produced over 300,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and millions of smaller weapons. How is such production possible? They mobilized their entire population, Christel discovered. Not just their warriors, but civilians too. Everyone contributed to the war effort. They even had something called victory gardens where non-combatants grew food to support the military. This concept was alien to the students. In galactic civilization, wars were fought by small professional military forces, while civilians continued their normal lives. The idea of an entire species dedicating itself to conflict was terrifying. Bright Pulse made an even more disturbing discovery. They have something called total war. Not just their armies fight, but their entire civilizations become targets. They attack enemy food production, manufacturing, transportation, and civilian populations. That violates every rule of civilized warfare, Flowen protested. You cannot attack non-combatants. It is barbaric. Humans seem to disagree, Zixara said grimly. According to these files, they believe that anything supporting an enemy war effort becomes a legitimate target. The students learned about human innovation under pressure, and this frightened them more than raw casualty numbers. When faced with new challenges, humans did not just adapt their existing tactics. They invented entirely new forms of warfare. During their Second World War, Christel reported, they developed something called radar to detect incoming aircraft. Then they immediately developed ways to jam radar signals. Then they developed new radar that could not be jammed. All within the same conflict. Here is something called sonar for underwater detection, Flowen added. But they also created stealth technologies to avoid detection. They were fighting on multiple levels simultaneously. The concept of layered warfare was new to the galactic students. Most species fought in straightforward ways. Ground forces against ground forces, ships against ships. Humans seemed to fight in dimensions the aliens had never considered. Bright Pulse discovered human psychological warfare and was horrified. They would broadcast false information to enemy forces, trying to damage their morale and make them surrender, without fighting. They called it propaganda. They also used fear as a weapon, Zixara added. Some human units developed reputations for being especially fierce or cruel. Enemy forces would sometimes retreat rather than face these particular units. The students found records of human special forces operations and could barely comprehend what they were reading. Small groups of humans would infiltrate behind enemy lines, sometimes for weeks or months, conducting sabotage and reconnaissance missions. According to this, Flowen said in amazement, they would parachute individual humans deep into enemy territory with minimal supplies and expect them to survive and complete complex missions. Some operations involved humans living among enemy populations for extended periods, gathering intelligence and organizing resistance movements, Christel added. The level of individual initiative required is incomprehensible. The aliens began to understand that human warfare was not just about superior numbers or better weapons. Humans fought with a creativity and adaptability that was unlike anything in galactic military history. Bright Pulse made another unsettling discovery. They have something called military doctrine, but they change it constantly. Most species develop one effective fighting method and use it for centuries. Humans seem to reinvent their entire military approach every few decades. Look at this progression, Zixara said, displaying a timeline. In less than 50 Earth years they went from cavalry charges with swords to mechanized tank warfare. Their rate of military evolution is incredible. The students learned about human weapons development and were stunned by the rapid advancement, from simple gunpowder weapons to guided missiles in just a few centuries. From wooden ships to nuclear, submarines in even less time, they weaponize everything, Flowen observed. Peaceful technologies like radio communications, rocket propulsion, and chemical manufacturing all become military tools within years of invention. Here is something particularly disturbing, Christel announced. They developed nuclear weapons by splitting atoms. The energy released from these weapons can destroy entire cities. The students stared at the descriptions of nuclear warfare with genuine terror. The idea that any species would create weapons capable of destroying their own planet was beyond their understanding. How many of these atomic weapons do they possess? Bright Pulse asked. Christel consulted the files. At their peak, they had over 60,000 nuclear weapons, enough to destroy their entire planet multiple times over. But why? Zixara demanded. Why create so many planet-killing weapons? According to these files, they were pointing them at each other, Flowen said quietly. Two major human factions built these weapons to threaten mutual destruction if either side attacked. The concept of mutually assured destruction was so alien to the students that they had trouble processing it. The idea that a species would threaten to destroy itself to prevent war was insane by galactic standards. Let me understand this correctly, Bright Pulse said slowly. They created weapons capable of ending their civilization, then pointed those weapons at themselves to maintain peace? And it worked, Christel added in amazement. They avoided major direct conflicts for decades using this strategy. The students continued reading about human military technology and found innovations that challenged their understanding of physics, stealth aircraft that were invisible to detection systems, precision-guided munitions that could hit targets from hundreds of kilometers away, and satellite communication networks that allowed global coordination of military forces. They have weaponized space itself, Zixara reported. Satellites for communication, navigation, and reconnaissance. Some satellites can guide weapons to targets on their planet's surface. Their logistics capabilities are equally impressive, Flowen noted. They can deploy large military forces to any location on their planet within days and supply them indefinitely. The students began to realize that modern human warfare was not just more advanced than historical conflicts, but fundamentally different in scope and complexity. Humans had created military systems that operated on a planetary scale. Look at this recent conflict, Christel said, displaying information about human involvement in what they called peacekeeping operations. They deployed forces to multiple locations simultaneously, maintained complex supply chains across vast distances, and coordinated with allied species using advanced communication networks. Their individual soldiers carry more firepower than entire armies from earlier eras, Bright Pulse observed. Personal weapons, communication devices, protective equipment, and targeting systems that were unimaginable just decades ago. When Professor Kethmal arrived for their discussion session, he found the students in an even more disturbed state than the previous day. Professor, Zixara began hesitantly, we have been studying human technological advancement. Their rate of military innovation seems impossible. How do they develop new weapons and tactics so quickly? Professor Kethmal settled his tentacles comfortably. An excellent question. What theories do you have? Perhaps they are naturally more intelligent than we assumed, Christel suggested. Or maybe they have longer lifespans, allowing individuals to accumulate more experience, Flowen offered. Actually, Professor Kethmal corrected, humans are not exceptionally intelligent compared to galactic average, and their lifespans are quite short. Their rapid advancement comes from something else entirely. What? Bright Pulse demanded. They never stop fighting, Professor Kethmal explained. Most galactic species have wars rarely, so military technology advances slowly. Humans have conflicts, constantly, so they are always testing, improving, and innovating their weapons and tactics. The implications of this hit the students like a physical blow. Humans were not just warlike by nature. The third day of research brought the alien students face to face with contemporary human military capabilities. What they discovered made their previous studies seem like ancient history lessons. Modern human warfare was not just an evolution of their historical conflicts. It was something entirely new and terrifying. Zixara accessed the most recent files with trembling claws. According to this data, humans have not become more peaceful as they advance technologically. They have become more efficient at warfare. The students learned that modern human military forces operated on principles that violated everything they knew about civilized conflict. Instead of large armies fighting pitched battles, humans had developed something called asymmetric warfare on a global scale. Flowen studied human special operations forces with growing horror. They have units called Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Green Berets. These are small groups of highly trained humans who can operate independently for extended periods behind enemy lines. What makes them so dangerous? Bright Pulse asked. They can survive in any environment on their planet, Flowen continued. Desert, jungle, Arctic conditions, underwater, even in space. Each soldier carries enough firepower to eliminate entire conventional military units. Christel discovered human electronic warfare capabilities and her crystal form dimmed with shock. They fight battles in electromagnetic spectrums that most species cannot even perceive. Radio communications, computer networks, satellite systems. They can attack and defend in all of these dimensions simultaneously. Here is something called cyber warfare, she continued. They can attack enemy computer systems from anywhere on their planet, stealing information, disrupting operations, and even controlling enemy equipment remotely. The students realized that humans had expanded warfare into realms that barely existed as concepts for other species. While galactic civilizations fought with energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, humans battled for control of information itself. Zixara made a disturbing discovery about human military logistics. Their ability to project force globally is unprecedented. They have something called rapid deployment forces that can reach any location on their planet within 24 Earth hours. How is such speed possible? Bright Pulse wondered. They have created a global transportation network specifically for military use, Zixara explained. Aircraft that can carry hundreds of soldiers and their equipment across continents, ships that can transport entire armies with their vehicles and supplies, and pre-positioned equipment stockpiles around their planet. Flowen found information about human precision weapons that made her fins tremble. They have developed missiles that can hit targets smaller than a single building from thousands of kilometers away. The accuracy is beyond anything in our military databases. But why do they need such precision? Chrysatel asked. According to these files, they can eliminate specific targets without damaging surrounding areas, Flowen replied. They can destroy enemy leadership, critical infrastructure, or military assets while leaving civilian areas untouched. The concept of surgical strikes was alien to the students. Most galactic warfare involved area weapons with significant collateral damage. The idea that humans could choose exactly what to destroy and what to preserve was both impressive and terrifying. Bright Pulse discovered human stealth technology and flickered with agitation. They have aircraft that are nearly invisible to detection systems, ships that can operate underwater for months without surfacing, and even individual soldiers who can avoid all known forms of surveillance. How do they achieve invisibility? Zixara asked. Multiple methods, Bright Pulse replied. Materials that absorb rather than reflect sensor energy, shapes that deflect detection beams, and electronic systems that jam or confuse enemy sensors. The students learned that human stealth technology was not limited to vehicles and equipment. Human special forces trained in camouflage and concealment techniques that allowed them to remain undetected in hostile territory for extended periods. Christel made another unsettling discovery. They have something called psychological operations that go far beyond their historical propaganda efforts. Modern human military forces can manipulate enemy decision-making through sophisticated information warfare. They study enemy psychology, culture, and communication patterns, she continued. Then they craft messages designed to create specific emotional and behavioral responses in enemy populations. The students realized that humans had weaponized understanding itself. They did not just fight enemy forces, they fought enemy thinking. Flowen discovered human space-based military assets and nearly stopped breathing. They have weaponized orbital space around their planet. Satellites for communication, navigation, surveillance, and targeting. Some satellites can guide weapons to surface targets with incredible precision. Do they have weapons in space? Zixara asked nervously. Not permanently deployed orbital weapons, according to these files, Flowen replied. But they have the technology to place weapons in space quickly if needed, and their existing satellites could be converted to offensive use. The implications were staggering. Humans had gained military control of the space around their home planet, giving them unprecedented strategic advantage. Bright Pulse made a discovery that shocked all of them. They have developed theoretical weapons based on technologies that barely exist. Directed energy systems, kinetic bombardment platforms, and something called particle beam weapons. Theoretical weapons? Christel asked. Weapons that exist only in laboratory testing or computer simulations, Bright Pulse explained. But the research suggests they could be deployed within years if needed. The students began to understand that human military development was not reactive but anticipatory. They were not just improving existing weapons, they were developing entirely new categories of warfare. Zixara found information about human military training that disturbed her greatly. Every human civilian receives basic military instruction. Not just professional soldiers, but ordinary citizens learn combat skills, weapons handling, and tactical thinking. Why would non-combatants need military training? Flowen asked. According to these files, humans believe their entire population should be prepared to defend their territory, Zixara replied. They call it civilian defense preparedness. The concept of an entire species trained for warfare was terrifying to the galactic students. Most civilizations had small professional military forces, while the vast majority of citizens lived peaceful lives. Christel discovered human wargaming and simulation capabilities. They constantly practice warfare using computer models that can simulate entire global conflicts. They test strategies, weapons systems, and tactical approaches against hypothetical enemies. Hypothetical enemies? Bright Pulse asked. Enemies that do not exist yet, Christel explained. They create fictional opponents with various capabilities and develop methods to fight them. The students realized that humans were not just preparing for known threats, they were preparing for unknown future conflicts against enemies they had never encountered. Flowen made perhaps the most disturbing discovery of all. They have detailed contingency plans for fighting wars under extreme conditions. Nuclear warfare, biological warfare, chemical warfare, and something called electromagnetic pulse warfare that could disable all electronic systems on their planet. They plan to fight wars that could destroy their own civilization? Zixara asked in horror. Not just plan to fight them, Flowen replied grimly. Plan to win them. The students sat in stunned silence, processing what they had learned. Human military capabilities were not just advanced, they were comprehensive, flexible, and designed for conflicts that most galactic species could not even imagine. When Professor Kethamel arrived, he found his students in a state approaching panic. Professor, Christel said, her crystal form pulsing with agitation, humans have created military systems that could threaten entire star systems. Why has the Galactic Council allowed them to join our community? Professor Kethamel's tentacles moved thoughtfully. What makes you think the council had a choice in the matter? The students stared at their professor in confusion. Think about what you have learned, he continued. When humans made contact with galactic civilization, they did not come as supplicants seeking knowledge. They came as equals offering trade and cooperation. But surely our combined forces could have prevented their expansion if necessary, Bright Pulse suggested weakly. Professor Kethmal's expression became grave. Tomorrow you will study the classified sections of human military development. After that, you will understand why the Galactic Council was very careful to make humans feel welcome in our community. The students exchanged terrified glances. If what they had already learned was just the unclassified information, what horrors awaited them in the secret files? Professor, Zixara whispered, should we be afraid? Professor Kethamal considered the question carefully. As long as humans consider us friends and allies, no. But I would strongly advise against giving them reasons to change that opinion. The ominous warning echoed in the students' minds as they left the classroom. Tomorrow they would learn what the Galactic Council really knew about human. The fourth day began with Professor Kethmal activating special security protocols in the classroom. The students watched nervously as energy barriers formed around their workstations and additional encryption systems came online. What you will access today, the professor announced solemnly, are classified intelligence files obtained through unofficial channels. This information is not available to the general galactic public. You will not discuss these findings outside this classroom. Zixara felt her mandibles clicking nervously. Professor, how classified is this information? Classified enough that several Galactic Council members have demanded it be sealed permanently, Professor Kethmal replied. They believe this knowledge could cause panic across civilized space. The students activated their terminals with trembling appendages. What they found in the classified files made their previous discoveries seem like children's stories. Chrysatel was the first to make a terrifying discovery. According to these intelligence reports, humans have been conducting detailed military assessments of every known galactic species since they joined our community. What kind of assessments? Floen asked, though she dreaded the answer. Complete. Tactical analyses, Christel continued, her crystal form dimming. Biological weaknesses, technological vulnerabilities, strategic resource dependencies, and social pressure points. They have identified exactly how to defeat every galactic civilization. The students stared at their screens in horror. While the galaxy had welcomed humans as peaceful newcomers, humans had been quietly studying everyone as potential enemies. Bright Pulse discovered something called Project Looking Glass and flickered with distress. They have run computer simulations of warfare against every galactic species. Multiple scenarios for each civilization, testing different strategies and weapon systems. Simulations? Zixara asked. War games using their advanced computers, Bright Pulse explained. They have practiced fighting my people 17 different ways. Each simulation tested different approaches until they found the most effective methods. Floen found the section dealing with aquatic species warfare and nearly fainted. They have developed specialized weapons and tactics for fighting underwater civilizations. Sonic disruption systems that can shatter Murloth communication organs, pressure weapons that exploit our breathing requirements, and something called cavitation torpedoes. Cavitation torpedoes? Christel asked weakly. Weapons that create underwater explosions specifically designed to kill aquatic beings, Floen replied, her voice barely a whisper. The students realized that while they had been studying human history as an academic exercise, humans had been studying them as military targets. Zixara made an even more disturbing discovery. They have something called the Omega Contingency. It appears to be a comprehensive plan for fighting the entire galactic community simultaneously. That is impossible, Bright Pulse protested. No single species could fight all of galactic civilization at once. According to these files, humans disagree, Zixara replied grimly. The plan involves rapid strikes against critical infrastructure, disruption of interstellar communication, and exploitation of political divisions between species. The students learned that human strategic planning operated on scales that dwarfed anything in galactic military thinking. While other species planned for individual conflicts, humans planned for total galactic warfare. Christel discovered the most terrifying aspect of human military preparation. Their expansion into galactic space was not peaceful exploration. Every human colony, research station, and trading post has been positioned for strategic military advantage. What do you mean? Flowen asked. Look at the locations, Christelle said, displaying a galactic map. Human settlements control key hyperspace routes, resource production areas, and communication relay points. If they wanted to disrupt galactic civilization, they are already in position to do so. The students realized that human integration into galactic society had been a military operation, disguised as peaceful colonization. Every human civilian outpost was actually a potential forward military base. Bright Pulse found intelligence about human weapons development that made their official military capabilities seem primitive. They have been secretly developing weapons, technologies far beyond what they have revealed publicly. Such as? Zixara demanded. Quantum disruption devices that can collapse matter at the subatomic level. Bright Pulse replied. Dimensional manipulation weapons that can attack targets through folded space. Reality distortion systems that can alter the fundamental physics of local spacetime. The concepts were so advanced that the students could barely comprehend them, let alone imagine defenses against such weapons. Flowen discovered human intelligence gathering capabilities and was horrified. They have infiltrated every major galactic organization, the Galactic Council, the Trade Federation, the Scientific Consortium, even this military academy. Infiltrated how? Christelle asked. Human agents posing as civilians, trade representatives, and even students, Flowen explained. They have been gathering intelligence about galactic military capabilities, political structures, and strategic vulnerabilities for years. The students looked around their classroom with new paranoia. Were there human spies watching them even now? Zixara made a discovery that shook her to her core. According to these files, humans have already begun implementing what they call Phase 1 of galactic integration, the establishment of permanent human presence throughout known space. What are the other phases? Bright Pulse asked fearfully. Phase 2 involves the gradual replacement of galactic leadership with human allies or agents, Zixara continued. Phase 3 is described as full human hegemony over galactic civilization. The students realized they were witnessing not the peaceful expansion of a new species, but the methodical conquest of the galaxy through infiltration and preparation. Christelle found information about human psychological warfare capabilities that targeted specific galactic species. They have developed propaganda and manipulation techniques tailored to the mental patterns of each civilization. They can influence our thoughts and decisions without us realizing it. Are they using these techniques on us now? Flowen asked in panic. According to these files, they have been using them since first contact, Christelle replied. Every interaction between humans and galactic citizens has been carefully planned to create specific impressions and emotional responses. The students began to question everything they thought they knew about human behavior and motivations. Had their own reactions been manipulated? Bright Pulse discovered the most terrifying revelation of all. Humans have developed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems, not just planets but the stars themselves. That is impossible, Zixara protested. No civilization has that level of destructive capability. They call them stellar disruption devices, Bright Pulse continued. Weapons that can cause stars to become unstable and explode, destroying everything in the system. The concept of star-killing weapons was beyond the students' ability to process. Such power was godlike, capable of eliminating entire civilizations. Without warning, Flowen made a final, devastating discovery. According to the most recent intelligence reports, humans are not originally from Earth. The classroom fell into absolute silence. They appear to be an expeditionary force from a much larger human civilization located outside known galactic space, Flowen continued. Earth was established as a forward base for galactic exploration and eventual conquest. How large is this larger civilization? Christelle whispered. The intelligence is incomplete, but estimates suggest millions of human-controlled star systems beyond our current space, Flowen replied. What we have encountered so far is just the advanced scouts. The students sat in stunned horror, processing the implications. The humans in galactic space were not representatives of a single planet species. They were the leading edge of a vast interstellar empire that had been studying and preparing to conquer known galactic civilization. When Professor Kethmal returned, he found his students in a state of complete shock. "Now you understand," he said quietly, "why this information is classified. The Galactic Council made a choice when humans requested membership in our community. They could either welcome them as allies or face them as enemies. But why did the Council not warn the public?" Zixara asked weakly. "What would be the purpose?" Professor Kethmal replied. "Panic? Despair? The knowledge that our entire way of life exists only because humans allow it to continue?" The students realized they had stumbled onto the most terrifying secret in galactic history. The galaxy was no longer free. It was occupied by a force so powerful that resistance was meaningless. "Professor," Bright Pulse flickered desperately, "what do we do with this knowledge?" Professor Kethmal's tentacles curled sadly. "You do what everyone with security clearance does. You smile when you meet humans. You cooperate with their requests. You pretend that everything is normal, and hope they continue to find us useful as allies rather than obstacles to their expansion," he added quietly. The students left the classroom that day knowing they could never see the galaxy the same way again. Tomorrow they would learn the final truth about humanity's ultimate plans, and they suspected that knowledge would change them forever. The final day of their research project arrived with a sense of inevitable doom hanging over the alien students. They entered the classroom to find Professor Kethmal standing beside a human male they had never seen before. The human was tall, wearing a simple civilian outfit, with calm brown eyes that seemed to see everything. "Students," Professor Kethmal announced, "this is Dr. Jake Morrison from the Human Diplomatic Corps. He will be observing our final discussion session." The students felt their various forms of perspiration begin as they realized a human had been listening to their conversations about human military capabilities. Zixara's mandibles clicked rapidly with stress. "Please," Dr. Morrison said with a gentle smile, "continue with your studies. I am only here to answer any questions you might have about the material you have been reviewing." The students exchanged terrified glances. The human knew exactly what they had been studying, including the classified files that were supposed to be secret. Christelle activated her terminal with trembling crystal appendages. The final files contained information so sensitive that additional biometric security was required. As she accessed the data, her crystal form began to dim with horror. "According to these files," she said in a barely audible voice, "human expansion into this galaxy is part of something they call the Long-Term Integration Protocol." "What does that mean?" Floen asked, though she dreaded the answer. "It means that human contact with galactic civilization was planned centuries ago," Christelle continued. "They have been observing our development and waiting for the optimal moment to make contact." Dr. Morrison nodded approvingly. "Very good. You have been thorough in your research." The students stared at the human in shock. He was confirming their worst fears with casual politeness. Bright Pulse accessed another file and flickered wildly with distress. "They have detailed psychological profiles of every major galactic leader, including members of the Galactic Council. They know exactly how each individual will react to various stimuli and pressure. Psychological manipulation on a galactic scale," Zixara whispered. "They are controlling our leaders without them knowing it." "Control is such a harsh word," Dr. Morrison said mildly. "We prefer to think of it as guidance toward mutually beneficial outcomes." Floen found intelligence about human long-term planning that made her fins quiver. "Their integration protocol extends forward for thousands of Earth years. They have planned the development of galactic civilization down to specific technological and social milestones." "We are very thorough in our planning," Dr. Morrison agreed. "It prevents misunderstandings and conflicts that could be harmful to everyone involved." The students realized they were looking at the ultimate expression of human strategic thinking. While galactic civilizations planned years or decades into the future, humans had planned millennia ahead. Christel made a discovery that shattered her remaining composure. According to these files, humans have the capability to eliminate galactic civilization completely if necessary. They call it the reset option. Reset option? Zixara asked weakly. Complete sterilization of all inhabited worlds in known space, Christel replied, her crystal form now barely glowing. They have pre-positioned weapons capable of destroying every planet in galactic territory within days. Dr. Morrison's expression became more serious. That option exists purely as a last resort. We sincerely hope it will never be necessary. The casual way he discussed the potential genocide of trillions of beings was more terrifying than any weapon description in their files. Bright Pulse discovered the true scope of human civilization and flickered between colors so rapidly it hurt to look at. The humans in our galaxy are part of something called the Terra Collective, a civilization spanning multiple galaxies with populations measured in the quadrillions. How many galaxies? Floen whispered. The files indicate at least 17 galaxies under direct human control. Bright Pulse replied, with exploration and integration protocols active in dozens more. The students tried to process numbers that were beyond their comprehension. Humans were not just a galactic power. They were a universal force operating on scales that dwarfed their wildest imagination. Zixara found the final, most terrifying piece of information. According to these files, our galaxy is considered a minor acquisition in the greater scheme of human expansion. We are designated as Integration Zone 12. Integration Zone 12? Christel asked. One of hundreds of similar zones where human civilization is gradually absorbing smaller galactic communities, Zixara explained. We are not unique or special. We are just the next item on their expansion list. Dr. Morrison smiled sadly. I am sorry you had to learn about it this way. But your professor felt it was important for future military leaders to understand the true nature of galactic politics. The students realized their entire civilization was nothing more than a small administrative task in the vast machinery of human expansion. Floen made one final discovery that broke her spirit completely. They have protocols for dealing with species that cannot be integrated peacefully, something called the Mercy Protocol. What is the Mercy Protocol? Bright Pulse asked, though none of them wanted to know. Complete elimination of the species, but in the most humane way possible, Floen replied in a dead voice. They will kill us kindly if we become too much trouble. The students sat in absolute silence, staring at their terminals. Everything they had believed about galactic civilization, about freedom, about the future, had been revealed as an illusion. Professor Kethmal spoke for the first time since introducing Dr. Morrison. Students, you now know what every military leader in galactic space eventually learns. We exist at human sufferance. Our civilizations continue because humans find us useful or at least non-threatening. But why? Zixara demanded, her voice breaking. Why do this to us? Why not just leave us alone? Dr. Morrison's expression became genuinely sympathetic. Because the universe is full of genuinely hostile civilizations that would destroy you without hesitation. The Devourers in Galaxy 7, the hive networks of the Outer Rim, the entropy cults that seek to end all life everywhere. By integrating your civilizations into our collective, we protect you from threats you cannot imagine, he continued. Yes, you lose some autonomy, but you gain security and the chance to develop under our guidance rather than being consumed by cosmic horrors. The students realized that humans saw themselves not as conquerors but as protectors, gathering lesser civilizations under their protection against even more terrible threats. What you call conquest, Dr. Morrison explained, we call rescue. Your galaxy will flourish under human guidance. Your peoples will advance technologically and socially far beyond what they could achieve alone. Christel asked the question they were all thinking. What if we refuse? What if our civilizations want independence? Dr. Morrison's smile became colder. Then you become a threat to the civilizations that have accepted our protection. And threats must be eliminated. The logic was inescapable. Accept human domination or face human annihilation. Professor Kethmal stood slowly. Students, your assignment is complete. You now understand human military capabilities and strategic thinking. How you use this knowledge will determine your future careers. The students gathered their belongings in stunned silence. Their worldview had been destroyed and rebuilt in 5 days of study. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Morrison spoke one final time. I hope you will consider positions in the Human Integration Corps after graduation. We need capable individuals from all species to help manage the transition to collective civilization. And if we refuse? Zixara asked. Then you return to your home worlds and live normal lives, Dr. Morrison replied. But you will always know the truth, and that knowledge will shape every decision you make for the rest of your existence. The students left the classroom knowing they faced an impossible choice. Join the human machine of conquest, or spend their lives knowing their civilizations existed only because humans allowed it. Professor Kethamal watched them go with ancient, sad eyes. Another class had learned the truth about galactic reality. Most would choose to serve the human system rather than live with the knowledge of helplessness. Dr. Morrison packed his observation notes and smiled. The integration of Galactic Zone 12 was proceeding exactly according to plan. Within a few generations, these students would be training the next group of young minds to accept human hegemony as natural and beneficial. The galaxy would be peaceful, prosperous, and completely under human control, just like the other 16 galaxies that had learned to embrace their place in the greater human collective. And if any civilization ever threatened that peace, the reset option was always available. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but humanity would protect its adoptive children from all threats, whether they wanted that protection or not. Because humans knew better than anyone else how cruel and violent the cosmos could be. After all, they had studied warfare longer than any other species in known space.